Welcome to this week's episode of Are You Brave Enough? Today we are going to be talking to the fabulous Christopher Rausch about his new book, Just You and Me Kid, and a variety of other topics related to leadership. He is an amazing guy, and the topic of our show today is, are you brave enough to take control of your life? Today's guest is Christopher Rausch. Christopher is debatably the world's most effective and impactful, unstoppable, no excuses coach, speaker, workshop facilitator, retreat leader, whose life apprenticeship from victim to victory is nothing short of miraculous and is surely inspiring. And I have been a guest on Christopher's show, and I know how amazing he is, at least as a talk show host.
Thank you.
Today, as an international keynote speaker, Rausch captivates and enthralls audiences with his story and then empowers them to accept life, what life has presented, embrace change, and take action personally and professionally. His commitment and credibility are indisputable, so he obviously lives his message. People leave awe-inspired and motivated to take action regardless of perceived obstacles. And I think that's why we called the show today, Are You Brave Enough to Take Control of Your Life? Because that's exactly what you did at one point, Christopher. And you're going to talk about that in your upcoming book. But welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm excited to dance the conversation and be on the other side of the microphone. So thank you.
You're welcome. So tell us a little bit about your victim to victor story.
Ooh, how much time do we have? The nutshell version of it, I think I've condensed it down pretty quickly. I was a former seventh grade homeless dropout who lived in the backseat of a station wagon with 18 cats and 4 dogs, along with a mother with various psychological disorders. I did that for 4 years. I endured a lot of different amazing situations that gave me the opportunity to test my resiliency, digging through dumpsters. My mother was sexually molested, sexually raped. I tried to commit suicide twice. Fortunately, I sucked at it. And then ultimately, after 4 years of being on the streets and doing drugs and fighting and all sorts of stuff, I had a gun put to my head. And so from that moment, I told the guy to pull the trigger and expected my life to be over at 17 years old. And fortunately for me, I'm a good person. And one of the people in this place that I was in came out and defended me and told the guy not to shoot me. Basically, the guy had just gotten out of prison. And I sat there and I thought, Karen, wow, I've been in this situation for 4 years. My mother and I have, fought hard to try to get out of it, and we're not getting out of it. She's continuing to do her own thing. I'm continuing to do worse. I'm continuing as I get older, I'm making worse decisions. And so I had to sit back and I had to ask myself, what is going to happen? And so I figured one of 3 things was going to happen. I was either going to get out of it in a pine box because I was doing stupid things with stupid people. I was going to get out of it in a patrol car. Fortunately, I've never been arrested. So grateful for that. Or number 3 was, I'm going to have to take responsibility for my life and leave my mother in this situation and go out there and do what I can do for myself. And that was the toughest decision that I ever had to make, because as a result of that, my life changed around so much. I got around the right people and ultimately got my GED at 18 years old. So I caught up with all my peers. I didn't think I could do it. And then 12 years later, I graduated with a master's degree the same year I bought my first house. So that is the super condensed version. And from that, I became a motivational speaker and a coach because I just took all of my adversity and all my skills of getting out of that and started helping people. And people just came to see me without even advertising.
Wow, that is an absolutely incredible story. And I know I've heard it before. You and I have talked about it before, but every time I hear it, it just is awe-inspiring, because to make that kind of choice at 17. And I talked last week with my guest last week about a moment in her life when she had to take stock and say, what is she living for? It was a little bit different circumstances, but it's funny how we get to places in our lives where there are defining moments,
Oh, yeah.
there are moments where we have the choice to live and live fully, to or continue to be a victim in one way or another. And victim is not a nice word, but so many of us really allow ourselves to be victim of our circumstances. And it's incredible that you did that. So the next question I want to ask you is, making the decision to let your mother continue on her path and choose a different path, what did that feel like?
That was super challenging. That was the toughest decision of my life because I literally thought I believe in God, source, and universe, and I believe when you open yourself up to a new opportunity, that He will provide, she will provide that opportunity to test you to see if you're really serious about what it is that you're making a commitment to. And so I made a commitment somehow, some way. I needed to get out of this situation, but somehow I needed to figure out how to still take care of my mom because she wasn't working. She was taking care of this motel we were staying at. It was a sleazy, crappy, trashy, drug infested motel. It was the worst place you could ever be. So when I went to work, I was doing telemarketing out of a guy's apartment, which sounds crazy, but it was legit. We were setting roofing appointments. He actually closed his business and then he moved it into his apartment. And I was going to work with one of the guys that lived in this motel with me, with us in a different room. And my boss that day says, well, I got some good news and I've got some bad news. And I'm like, okay, I've had enough bad news to last a lifetime. What's the good news? And he says, I want to leave you guys my apartment. And it was in Huntington Beach, California, here in California, where I live. It's a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment. It was about 20 minutes from the beach. And he's like, I want to give you this apartment with, the first and the down and everything. He goes, you guys just move in and take over the I still remember this, $825 rent. I'm sure now it's probably $3,000 by now.
Probably more
And
than
yeah, you guys can take over this place. And Robert looks at me. He's like, oh my God, dude, we could do this. We could get my brother John in here and we could get Rambo in here and and we could make this happen. I'm like, oh my God, this would be so cool. And then I was reminded, I'm like, wait a minute, I have a mother with very psychological challenges who's not working right now. I'm working 3 jobs to pay the motel rent. How is this going to work? And so I thought about it and I thought about it and I thought about it. And I thought, you know what, Chris, maybe now as you're approaching 18 years old and all the different things you've tried and gone through and everything, and she saw most of it, maybe she'll say, you know what, Chris, I've messed up your life enough. I mean, I was abused, physically and mentally abused all my life. I was abused by kids at school. I had no self-confidence. I had no friends except for this one guy. I was at a bad spot. I was in a really bad spot. And I knew that if I kept going and drinking and doing drugs, I was going to wind up in jail or dead. I mean, that was it. Or I was going to live a life of paycheck to paycheck, drinking beer and eating Cheetos and whatever. I'm like, did I really sign up for that? And so I thought maybe she'll tell me that I need to go out and do this. And so I approached her about it and I said, I've got this opportunity. And she called me every name in the book, said, how could you even think about doing this? How could you leave me? You're selfish. You're this, you're that, going on with the name calling. And so because they heard this whisper that said, Chris, she's going to be okay. And I didn't know about codependency at that point. I didn't realize that, of course, I'm doing everything for her. Why would she want that to change? She could go off and she was doing espionage with the drug dealers there and working with the cops. She was doing all this weird stuff. It was really stupid. And so I sat there and I decided to put myself first. And it was one of the most difficult, heartbreaking decisions. I still went back there every night and still helped her out. I still gave her cash. She wound up getting stronger. She wound up kind of coming out of that situation and getting a house later on. It's all in the book. It's a whole roller coaster ride. But ultimately we have to ask ourselves, what do I deserve? Right? I didn't deserve the abuse. I didn't deserve the negativity. I deserved an opportunity. And here it was being presented to me. And if I didn't take this opportunity, might I have that regret for the rest of my life? And so I took that plunge. And that's what so many people are afraid to do. They're afraid to jump. They're afraid to go take that risk and leave that marriage or leave that job or start that business or do whatever it might be in fear of failure or mistakes or what will happen, or this person needs me. They'll never be able to make their own lunch or do their laundry without me. It's ridiculous. You got to make that jump. And when you do that, that allows that other person to become stronger as well.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we don't understand. We're not taught that, right? We're always taught to put other people first and be selfless. And those aren't bad things. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we need to help
Yeah.
other people and we need to contribute and we need to be compassionate. There's no doubt about that. But there is that point where people will hold that over your head, like your mother tried to do, to
Oh
say,
yeah.
well, you can't have what you want because you have to take care of me first. And anybody that's doing that to you is not someone who is healthy or supportive in your life, right?
No.
We know that on one level, but on a deeper level, there's some part of us that likes to be needed. And I think this is especially true for women. We like to be needed. So I always talk about, when I talk about risk taking for women, I always talk about how sometimes taking risks in your personal relationships are the hardest risks for women to take because they're so afraid to blow up those relationships. They're so afraid to put themselves first because we're taught that relationships are how we survive. And I mean, biologically, we're a little bit wired that way too. So I think it's as challenging as it is for a guy to do it, and especially for a man to do it with his mother in that situation, is just incredibly, incredibly difficult. So kudos to you for doing that and for taking that
Thank you.
risk. And it's an important lesson for people that healthy relationships allow space to grow and they don't hold us back.
And you need
And I
boundaries. You need boundaries, and you got to stop tolerating what you continue to tolerate, because like Dr. Wayne Dyer said, if you continue to do what you've always done, you will continue to get what you've always got. And we know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. But how many people might be listening to this broadcast right now thinking, oh, let me put the mirror up. I always talk about the mirror, like put the mirror up and take a look in that mirror. Who's that person that's staring back at you? Are you proud of that person? Do you love that person? Do you have faith and belief that you deserve to have what it is that you really desire in this world and not put up with this continued, travesty of a life? It's pretty amazing, because so many people, Karen, and you know this, they hope, wish, and pray. Oh, I pray someday I find the right person. Oh, I hope one day I get to start my own business. Oh, I wish I could leave my job. Like, well, where's the tangible action from that? Where is it? Where's the breaking point going to be? And ask yourself the question, when will I have had enough? And I invite always people I invite a lot of people to say that, when will I have had enough? And unfortunately, sometimes it has to get to the point where they get to that breaking point, like I did. And so many other people I know in my life have had to get to that breaking point. We have to hit rock bottom. But if you sit there and ask yourself, when will I have had enough of this abuse? When will I have had enough of this tolerating all this mediocrity? And then you get serious with yourself and you start to take progressive action every single day. It's amazing what you can accomplish in 6 months to a year to 2 years. And people have to consider, like, well, that's a long time. I'm like, you're 35 years old. Give it a couple of years to rewrite some of the belief systems that you've had in your life, and just fast forward and think, wow, what would it feel like to be in a great relationship that you're excited about? What would it feel like to go to a job that you feel empowered to go do more? How would that, oh my God, Chris, that would be so amazing. Like, we'll start today.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether you're 35 or 45 or 55 or 65. There's no age limit as to when we can reinvent ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I have clients that are reinventing themselves in their 50s. I reinvented myself in my 50s.
Mhm.
I saw my job getting to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. And I I was fortunate enough to have that wherewithal to know, okay, 5 years from now, this is not where I want to be, and to start to plan before I got to the breaking point. But there's been other times in my life where I've definitely gotten the breaking point, and everybody has their own rock bottom. And some people's rock bottoms have to be really, really, really ugly before they'll make the change. And that is so sad because it doesn't have to be that way. We don't
No.
have to have that horrible rock bottom. But that's sometimes what it takes for people to move. And I know you and I both work with people to try to get them to move, to help them to move, to support them to move before they get to that rock bottom point.
Yes, yes. I mean, that's one of the key things is I find is the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges I've had in my life as a coach for over 20 years is seeing somebody continually shoot themselves in the foot and be like, okay, can I just spend 15 minutes with you? Like, literally, you could turn your life around in 15 minutes. And the hardest part, Karen, and I'm sure you've seen this, is the people that you love the most. And I've had to go to therapy, literal therapy. Like, okay, this person in my life is experiencing these things, but if they could just do these 5 things, they won't do that. But I don't want to sit there and witness it. And so through therapy, I wound up, oh, that's a repeated cycle in my brain about my mom. How long am I going to stay here and try to save this person when they're clearly not ready to be saved? They clearly want to continue what they're doing. And so I've had to sit there and go, you know what? It's their journey. It's their journey. I will be there for them when that day comes. And up until that point, I'm going to enjoy my journey as well.
Yeah. And to what you said earlier about codependency, that's such a prevalent part of codependency. The whole thing of wanting to rescue someone, wanting to save someone. And I've been certainly guilty of that in the past
Me too.
myself. Well, because we want to help.
Yeah.
And as a coach, you want to help, but recognizing as a coach that you can't create a codependent relationship with the people that you're trying to coach. You've got to let them have their journey. And some people aren't ready for coaching. They aren't ready for therapy. They have to hit their rock bottom first. So let me switch the conversation up a little bit though, and ask you about your decision to write this book, which I know is going to probably come out in 2024 at this point. It's called Just You and Me, Kid. It is the story that you talked about earlier. Yep,
Hmm.
there you go.
There it
It is the
is.
story you talked about earlier, but what made you want to put this story in writing?
I didn't want to. The God's honest truth. The God's honest truth. One of my mentors, a dear friend of mine, Patricia, we'll call her Patty. She's a dear friend of mine. We've been in contact every once in a while. And she, out of the blue, reached out to me and she goes, "Are you writing a book?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I've got three books in the process and then one down the road." And she goes, "Well, tell me about them." And I said, "Well, I've got this one book called Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. It's a motivational development book. It's all based on my coaching and it walks per." No. Okay, well, I've got this other book called 69 Tips for Living a Kick-Ass Life. And it's basically life's little instruction booklet, but it's for people who like George Carlin and AC/DC and maybe a little Tony Robbins. It's very spicy, right? If you want to just get to the point about how you can change your life, it's all these little tidbits about how you can change. No. And I'm like, all right. So I've got this other book, a children's. No. I'm like, she says, "Oh, what's the book you want to write in the future?" And I said, "Well, that's one of my life story." She goes, "That one." And I said, "I don't want to. No, Patty, I don't want to write that one right now. That one's going to be painful. That one, I don't. I figure I want to write. I'm justifying. I'm like, I'm going to write these other books, and then they're going to be popular, and then this one's going to come out, and it's going to get published, and all the other ones are going to get published, and blah blah blah." She goes, "No, Chris, the world needs to hear your story." And this was back in 2019, and so officially after the pandemic started, I sat down on October 20th, 2020, and figured, oh, it's going to take me a couple of months to bang this out and it'll be fine. And it took me 3 years and it was an incredible process. It was a very healing process. I can't recommend it enough. Even if you never intend to publish your book, write your life story and write your life story with the specific intention to try to see other people's roles in your life as positive. Like, how can I see my mother's abuse as positive? How can I see the way she spoke to me as positive? And how can I see that from her perspective? Because the God's honest truth, Karen, is when before she passed away, she goes, "I know you're going to write your life story one day and paint me out to be a bitch." And I said, "No." And so I'm gonna paint you out to be exactly who you were and who you are. It's up to the reader whether they want to make that definition. And I said, "I tell you what, Mom." And this is about a year and a half before she got really sick. And I said, "Let's write the book together. Let's pick 10 situations out of our life. You write your perspective, I'll write my perspective, and then jointly we'll try to see what we can learn from each other in that perspective." And I still love that idea. I give that idea to a lot of my friends. Like, really just like go back and hash out those details. One of my friends is actually doing it. And
Oh,
so
very
I bought her her favorite pens, and she was very particular, OCD, autistic on the spectrum kind of stuff. And I bought her favorite. She never wrote a single word. And so my intention after she passed was to honor her and to say, okay, how can I learn from her perspective what she was trying to do in that situation? So it was very healing and very growth oriented for me. So much to the point, I'll give this part away. I won't tell you what's in it. The last chapter is a letter to her. She's been dead now for 12 years. Is a letter to her, kind of following up on my life and thanking her for all those different situations that have now helped me in my later life as a parent, as everything else. So yeah, it's been an incredible opportunity, and the editing process is not fun.
The editing process is no fun for any writer. I mean, I've written two fiction books now, and I've got a third one that I'm trying to write at the moment. And the editing process is never fun, but it's valuable, and you learn. I think I learn as much from the editing process as I do from writing the books themselves. Although I'm not writing my life story, at least
Yeah.
not at this point in time. Maybe sometime in the future.
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know whether that's in the cards or not. But your story is amazing, and I agree with you. Regardless of whether you're going to publish it, writing your life story, writing things down, using that as a way to process, that's just critical for me. I write all the time just as a way to process because
Mhm.
there's something about putting things down on paper that changes it and a few years ago, I took like all my journals from that I've had for years, and I looked at them and I thought, there's so much stuff in here, but there's so much crap in here, right? Too. I mean, things that had happened and things that just complaining and bitching about things and situations. And I decided, it's time to release all that. So I actually burned them all.
Wow, congratulations. That's
So
a great ceremony. I love that.
absolutely. I think it was a New Year's Day. We had a fire in our fireplace and I took the covers off and I put all the pages in the fire and it was just cleansing. So sometimes even writing stuff down and then burning it or tearing it up or putting it in water and letting it dissolve, whatever that, find that to be such a healing ritual and a
Mhm.
way to let things go if you're not gonna, put them out into the world. But
Yeah.
so you changed your mind because of your friend. How do you feel about putting the book out now? Does it feel risky to you to put it out now?
Not whatsoever. No, I'm excited. I'm very excited. So many people have heard my story on shows like this and through my own speaking and everything else. They're like, when's your book going to come out? When's your book going to come out? And I've had a few people say, like, when your book comes out, I want to make a movie out of it. And so I've even got the producer of The Secret, JT Fox. I believe that's the right person. He actually is interested in reading the book after it's published to make a movie out of it because, and there's literally been no movies that have been done about my life. I'm like thinking about going through the homeless struggle, the hero's journey, right? You've heard of Joseph Campbell, right? So Joseph Campbell, anybody watching or listening to this, go to YouTube, type in the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell story. It's like an hour and 23 minutes. And it talks specifically about the fact that we go through these ebbs and flows, these ups and downs. I mean, to get to the peak, to be able to see beautiful things, you have to go through the valleys, you have to go through, get scraped up. And so I really believe that this book eventually will be made into that movie and it'll impact millions of lives. And I'll look back on it and think like, wow, I'm already grateful for all the harsh experiences that I've went through and experienced because it made me the man I am today. But yeah, I fully am supportive of it and ready for it to rock.
Awesome. That's great because sometimes it feels very, to your point, it feels very risky to put that out there at first when you do it. But when you realize that your story, and again, I talked to the guest on the show the week before you, I think, about telling her story and just how much you have the opportunity to impact other people by sharing. And even if it's not on a big scale, it doesn't have to be a movie or a book or anything big, but sometimes even just sharing your story with the people in your life that you think, might not be interested can really change them. We always think, oh, well, if I have to tell my story, it has to be big, right? It has to be huge. We can tell the story in small ways that can have a ripple effect, right? We're just dropping that stone in and you don't know where it's going to go. You
It's
don't
true.
have to write a best-selling memoir. You can share your story with your neighbor and have it absolutely change your relationship with them and perhaps their lives. And then that will change somebody else's life and so on and so on. So it doesn't have telling people your story doesn't have to be this big gigantic thing. And I always tell people that about taking risks. You start small, start with something small, start with one step. And you never know where that one step is going to lead you. And that's clearly what you've done in your life, taken one step, and it's led you to just some absolutely incredible places. So tell me your favorite risk as an adult.
My favorite risk as an adult.
The biggest risk you've taken as an adult that
I'm not
has.
an adult yet. No,
Of
that's a
course
great.
you aren't.
Yeah, I am on paper. No, I would have to say my biggest risk as an adult was leaving my very, very comfortable corporate position back in November of 2019. I'd been there for over 26 years. It was in my zone of excellence. If you've ever read the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, which is a fantastic, fantastic book, talks about operating in our zone of greatness, zone of excellence, zone of genius. And for the last 20 years, I've been a coach and a speaker and a podcaster and radio show host and all those different things. But I had the comfort of my day job where I made a very comfortable living. I had a corner office. I had a great team. I had my master's degree in organizational management. So it was all easy. It was a great company until the last 5 years or so. But yeah, leaving that, it became a mutual decision essentially, and not going back to corporate and deciding, Chris, this is your time to go full time with your coaching and your speaking and everything else. That was a huge, huge risk because all my entire life I had developed the formula for success. If I continue to do what you need me to do and I continue to exceed those expectations, you will continue to pay me more and give me more responsibility. Therefore, I can buy more stuff and I can be happier. And so I knew that. So being able to go, oh, wow, what would it be like if I no longer had this comfortable paycheck anymore and the 6 weeks of vacation and the bonus at the end of the year and all this, comfortability of knowing my identity was wrapped up as being the director of operations with international logistics control and, disaster recovery and all these different things that I was responsible for, pounding chest, right? It was scary. And for me, the biggest value out of that, honestly, Karen, leaving was that the whole thing about that was my identity was so wrapped up in who I was there that 2 days after I left, I was no longer needed. They didn't have any questions for me. I told the guy that took over my responsibilities, I said, like, I know that I'm working on a lot of stuff. You know, if you need any help, I'm glad to help you. Overnight, I was no longer an issue or a concern or needed. And that drove me into a dark hole for a period of time because I was like, wow, what was I? What was this all about? And I kept focusing on the past. And as a coach, I sit there and I always go back. I'm my own best coaching client. So I sit there and I ask myself, I literally ask myself out loud, Chris, if somebody came to you right now with the same situation, what would you tell them? And I would tell them, why are you looking in the past? Your future's that way. Go that way. You've been asking for this for the last 20 years, dude. This is your spring.
Oh,
Weren't laughing that long. You're frozen.
no, I'm unfrozen now. You froze too. So you were amazing. You were in the middle of, dude, this is your springboard.
Okay. So you want me to start over right there from that point? They're going to edit.
Yes, start
Okay.
start over from, dude, this is your springboard.
Okay. Cut. So, dude, this is your springboard. Go look in the future. This is your opportunity right now to go take a hold of that. But you're focusing on the past. And I was just working with a client before this call, and I said, focus goes, energy flows where focus goes. So I immediately just sat there and I had that conversation with myself. I'm Chris, like when you wake up tomorrow, you're no longer that director of operations. That is a former life of yours. That is a section of your life that is now gone. You have this amazing opportunity. And I had put my application in a few places because there was, now I could, out where I live, there's a ton of warehouse jobs. And I thought, okay, man, I can move up to a VP position or a COO position. And then it was like February 23rd, where I told my wife, I said, I came to her with my finances and stuff like that, because we have separate finances. We're kind of weird that way. And I said, I'm going to go full time. And she goes, do it. And I started doing it. And then all of a sudden, March 20th happened. And it was like COVID. Oh, it's only a 6-week thing. And then we went through a year and a half of fun stuff. And so I got the opportunity to spend time with my son and be a dad. So my life has taken so many turns and challenges and opportunities in the last couple of years, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, because I'm living my life and I'm not just existing in it, being comfortably miserable. Like I used to think about, like, I'm comfortably miserable. I have great money, da, 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 da. Why should I leave? But now I'm experiencing my true greatness.
And I totally get that. I made the decision to leave my comfortable corporate job with the corner office and the bonus at the end of the year and all of that about a year before you did, I think in 2018. And it was like a big vacation for the first 3 or 4 months. And then it was like, okay, you're right. My identity was exactly that, what you said. And so many of us, that is what our identity is, looking externally. What do you need? What do I need to do to please you? What do I need to do to get ahead? If I meet your expectations, then I'm going to be rewarded. And we are so focused on that external reward that when that external reward is suddenly taken away, it's like, oh my goodness. And a lot of people have trouble with retirement this way, right? Because they get from this place where this was their identity, this is what they were used to, and it stops. And to change that and to learn how to be internally rewarding to yourself, to be internally motivated, takes something. It's not necessarily as easy as it sounds like it's going to be on the surface, because I had trained my whole life exactly that. Well, if I do this when I was in school, if I do this, I'll get good grades. When I was on the swim team, if I do this, I'll make the relay team. When I was, in college, when I was at work, even in our relationships, right? If I do this, I'll get, you know, my partner will be happy. If I do this, my kids will be happy. So we're always looking for that external motivation. And it still comes back. I'm going to circle it back to when you take control of your life, like you did when you were 17, and you
Mhm.
had to say, I'm going to take control of my life. And the reality is we have to do that over and over again in our lives, right? We
True.
have to, we get into situations and they get comfortable and we find them, we're being motivated by somebody else. And we realize, okay, no, I need to take control of my life back again. And there's an ebb and flow to that. And I think it's a natural ebb and flow. To your point, we have the ups and downs, we have the hero's journey. I am also a big Joseph Campbell fan, and I agree with you about that video. It's amazing. And it really shows that we go off into the unknown at different parts of our lives. And we then have to have that self motivation. And I love the whole concept of renewing that from time to time
Yeah.
in our lives.
All the time, all the time. That's why I have a tattoo on my forearm that says, "What doesn't kill me only makes me stronger." And I got that in 2016, where I was going through a dark period of time where I really couldn't coach anymore. I stopped coaching. I wasn't being congruent with myself. I was giving people advice that I could hear in my head, like, Chris, you need to be doing that as well. And so, you have to have those periods of introspection and ask yourself, am I on the right path? I'm climbing the ladder, but is the ladder against the right building? Is it with the right people? And that's going to continue to happen all throughout our life as we get older. And I think that life happens like a book, like there's sections in a book. And sometimes you get to a section and you need to break that. And that's important. But so many people hang on. And then ultimately, since we know a lot of the same things, there was a book out there called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, written by a hospice nurse.
Yeah.
And that number one regret, and it's a hard book to read. It's a hard book to read, because you sit there and start looking at yourself like, oh, wow, what am I putting up with? The number one regret of the dying that this person sat with was that they lived the life they thought they were supposed to live, but they never lived the life they truly wanted to live. Yeah. And that is sad. When you think you're on your deathbed and you're worried about, right now, you're worried about what your boss thinks and what your mom thinks and your spouse thinks and your husband thinks and your brother thinks and God thinks. And at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, I want to look back on my life and go, wow, I took so many chances. And yeah, it wasn't easy. And yeah, I may have made the wrong decision here, but God, I lived my life. Yeah. To think beyond your deathbed and go, all of those chances, I could have been an actress. I could have been a dancer. I could have been an architect. I could have been this. I didn't have to get married and have 7 kids when I really wanted to go and travel the world. Like, it's never too late, ladies and gentlemen, no matter where you're at. Like you said, Karen, I coached a 69-year-old woman a couple of years ago who I can't go into all the details, but it was a pretty amazing, epic journey of what she came out the other side being. And she is living a kick-ass, unstoppable life now. She's 71. She's married. She is rocking it. And she thought her life was over.
Wow, that is incredible. And there is no time limit on our ability to start to live our lives. We can do it at any time, and we can change at any time. What has worked for one part of our life doesn't make it wrong. So we talk about, okay, we both had long corporate careers. We both learned a ton from those long corporate careers. They weren't wrong. They were part of our journey. Yep. It's just not serving us anymore. And I think that's the question that people sometimes don't ask. Okay, is this still working for you? Is this still serving you? Are you still growing? And I love the analogy, which I use over and over again, about the potted plant, right? The people, you get it comfortable in your potted plant, but the roots, you start to die because your roots get constricted. And if you don't move yourself into a new pot, you're either growing or shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
so true.
And just to grow, you have to take risks. And I love that. So if you wanted to leave the audience today with one thought before we wrap this up, what would it be?
Stop tolerating things. The fact of the matter is that you take out a pen and paper and write down what you're tolerating from yourself, what you're tolerating from others, and what you're tolerating from inanimate objects, and you be deadly honest with yourself. And then you take those tolerations and then you give it a couple of weeks and you sit there and you monitor it and you add to it, because you will inevitably not capture all the tolerations. And then you make a choice to eliminate a third of those tolerations. Your life will be completely different. And yes, will you have to make tough decisions? Yes, will it hurt people's feelings? Yes, will it be uncomfortable? But on the other side of it, it'll be so massively worth it. That's one of the exercises my coaching clients do. And inevitably, they don't come up with enough tolerations at first. And all of a sudden they're like, Chris, wow, I'm tolerating, like, they're embarrassed. Like, I'm tolerating 30 things from other people. I'm like, yeah, just imagine if you didn't tolerate a third of those. What would life be like? Oh my God, I'd have so much time for this and that. Stop your excuses. I'm the no excuses guy. Stop your excuses. Stop your tolerations. Get a clear vision of who it is that you are and who it is that you're becoming. And this world will change for you, I promise. And the only thing I ask that you do with all of that is go out there and make the world a better place, because we need people like you out there vibrating at a higher frequency than what the news media and the politicians will say. So go out there, live a kick-ass, unstoppable life.
Absolutely, 100%. I could not agree more. And I love that tolerations exercise. I have a similar one from my clients, not quite the same, but I love that because we are amazing how much we do tolerate in our lives. And that goes back again to take control of your life, really. When you stop tolerating, you're taking control. When you're tolerating, you're giving your power to other people. And
Mhm.
really, I hate to say it, but it is as simple and as painful as that. But it's also as simple and obvious of how to change it as well. And I love that. So thank you for being the guest on Are You Brave Enough? You can
Thank
find
you.
Christopher's contact information in the show notes. But Christopher, do you want to just give them one way to get in touch with you?
Super easy. NoExcusesCoach.com. NoExcusesCoach.com. All the information about the book, my podcasts, my speaking, coaching, all blogs, everything. It's all right there.
Awesome.
Thank you, Karen. It's been an honor. You've asked some awesome questions, and I'm happy to be able to distribute this out to other people so that they can get the education out of this of what we shared.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today, Christopher. As always, we've had a great conversation. I could keep talking for hours, but we don't want to do that. We will respect everybody's time and wrap up today. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Are You Brave Enough? And don't forget to like and follow the channel so that you get a new episode every week. Loving this content? Are you brave enough to hit subscribe? I dare you to hit subscribe. Don't miss a single episode of Are You Brave Enough?